Good morning from northern Wisconsin. It's a beautiful October day. It did not hit 60 degrees yet, like they said, so I'm kind of cold. Taking a break to warm up. Anyway, I put a Shinko 700 on the back of this KLR to replace the OEM tire. I got about 800 miles on it yet, and I wanted to give some opinions on it because I do think it's a good fit for this bike, and it would be a good fit for a lot of people. But first, we need to weed out two types of people out of this conversation. One, if you are riding big, heavy ADV dual sport bikes in like sugar sand or slimy, muddy clay, no, like I get it, man. You need to run more aggressive tires. 50-50 tires are not going to work for you. That like Georgia or Florida with that sugar sand. No, you guys need to run more aggressive. But number two is the complete noobs who buy an ADV or dual sport bike and think that's automatically going to make them a good rider off-road. So they don't understand suspension setup. They don't understand preload. They don't understand the weight distribution front to rear. They don't adjust their air pressure. That is never going to have any tire grip good. Now, you will hear people always whine that they jump on, like, say, this KLR. They have never adjusted the rear preload, so it's at 1. They're kind of fat. They're a little heavy. They're a little big bro. That bike gets on here, sits like that. You don't really know it because you've never adjusted your preload back up. So all their weight is on the rear tire. Nothing's on the front. They get on the first stretch of gravel road with no weight in the front and running street PSI, and that bike and tire in the front slide out of place. And guess what they do? They go online and say, these tires are shit. And the irony is it's their own fat ass and unskilled ass that doesn't know any better. But it's just easier to blame tires than it is yourself. That's a very common scenario around here. Anyway, back to the tires, if you're still listening. So what Shinko does is they're kind of famous for copying a tire design, and they put their own little twist on it, and they all seem to do a better job at it, which I kind of like. So you can see this kind of similar to the OEM Dunlop 750 tires that come on the KLRs, but them tread blocks ran more horizontal. Shinko turned these upright, and what that did is put big gaps in here. So now you have more tread block opening. And they also added about 30-40% more tread depth. So let's go look at the front. This is still the OEM front with about 4,000 on it. You can definitely tell that's a harder tire too. So what Dunlop did is what truck tire manufacturers are doing. They sell a set of tires that's kind of dumbed down a little bit, less tire, that's less rubber that they have to ship out. So they give these manufacturers a deal on all these tires. So they're making money. The manufacturers are getting something they need for less cost. So these were not very deep tread depth right off the bat. You can see like that was the maximum depth all these were at that time. Now, let's get back to this. So even though it's a not super aggressive tread design, I like 50-50 tires with side lugs sticking out. I need that. So what happens is that when you sink, your tire in contact at that point isn't going to do a whole lot, but these things out the side are going to be what's digging and clawing and scratching. Coincidentally, this is a huge key to these on the pavement. These tires are excellent on pavement. This is a big reason. So this outer knob is bridged and connected, so that is not going to squirm or move while you're laid in on the side on a curve. These handle so much better on pavement than the stock tires. And they handle so much better than the Shinko 44, which I'm going to be comparing them to a lot. I really like that tire. However, there is another huge difference between that and the 244, and that is the thickness of this tire. This thing is a tank. It's 4 millimeters thick, which is basically the equivalent of a 10-ply truck tire. You will never get a puncture on this tire, ever. When you see people getting flat tires a lot, if you pay attention, it's a Shinko 244. And you know why? Because that tire has a very thin carcass and thin sidewall. This tire and the 244, when compared to different PSIs, is night and day difference. I run my tires a lot lower once I get to terrain like this, so I ride them at street pressure up to where I'm going. I get off, take a piss, drink some water, drop the PSI down, and I usually lower my windscreen a little bit to get down more so it's not in my face. So, the funny thing is, reading the reviews on these before I bought it, it said round profile. I thought, well, no shit, it's a tire. Well, they weren't lying. This thing is round, and with that super hard carcass, it does not want to compress when I'm dropping the PSI. So immediately when I got this thing on some dirt and gravel roads, it was squirrely, more so than the OEM tire ever was. Okay, so I got down and I dropped the PSI to 18 on this bike. Usually I did that, and it's still, the rear would still not really flatten out and give me that grip I was looking for. And that's when I started to make the correlation of the rounded profile they're talking about, coupled with this really thick carcass, was not letting this tire squish. So I dropped it down to 16. Now, personally, I think that is the lowest anybody should ever go on a OEM KLR tube tire without a rim lock. And that seemed to do the trick. So now, if you've never adjusted air pressure before, you probably just think, I don't need to fucking do that. It makes a huge difference. So if you don't really know, with your street PSI in right now and that tire is not allowed to compress, you're basically running on right here. That's all the tire that you're making contact with. Now, when I drop these down to 16, 18, this tire will squish, and now you're actually hitting that. You're putting like 100 to 200% more of the existing you were on back into contact with the terrain. Now, the biggest area this makes a huge difference in is gravel roads and dirt roads, where you think, well, you don't think, you know, your bike's kind of skating and floating all over the place. With your front tires adjusted correctly to the correct PSI, that stables the bike right out. Another fun fact is the completely bald in the middle OEM rear tire actually handled dirt and loose gravel better, because that tire was just like that. It was so stable on the dirt. It was funny, but you know, that center strip getting completely gone, I don't want to push it any farther. So the typical terrain around here is this. I'm on grass, dirt, light sand. The big thing is wet leaves, wet grass, wet rocks. If you are trying to ride these things like a race bike, and you encounter some of that stuff pretty fast, you're gonna start sliding. These softer compound tires, when I'm doing river crossings and you're on them slimy rocks, it really just seems to not want to spin out of control wildly, but I'm also experienced on that. And this is a chuggy tractor KLR, which it's not a two-stroke that's going to be the point of fire. Everything, this thing is maybe here, it just lugs and hooks up pretty damn good. Now, let's talk about mud. Now, I will flat out admit I am the biggest bitch you will ever meet when it comes to mud. I hate it with my trucks, bikes, everything. But my damn curiosity gets the better of me. So my fun time is just going exploring all the dirt roads and logging roads we have up here in northern Wisconsin, which is just freaking perfect bike for this. And boy, that mud hole looks deep, but damn it, I want to see what's on the other side. So I haven't had a problem with these getting through any mud pit. If you had a big heavy bike like this completely stopped on a hill, you're gonna have problems. But I kind of think any tire would give you problems with that. So these got me through mud. It's not a great mud tire, but it's not what I use this bike for. And I think what happens is people go for the most aggressive tire they can, and it wrecks their riding experience on the pavement, which for most people it's 90-10. You got to be honest with yourself. So not only do them tires ride and rumble like shit on pavement, I'm going to call out Tusk tires here. I just not a fan of them unless you're in a very hot climate because they're rock hard. I think they're cheap tires. They chunk, they break, they rip off. The fronts, people always have problems tracking on the highway. They'll just dip and dive into any little groove. So I get it. Like if you're out in the desert and stuff, I think them Tusk tires would be a good fit. But otherwise, I see brand new people with no experience immediately go put on a Tusk D Sport, and I just can't help but think they just put mud tires on their minivan because they don't have the skill at all to ride that fast. What they are doing is overcompensating for their lack of skill and knowledge on my first rant here about having their suspension set up and the tire pressure adjusted. So back to 50/50 tires like this, if you know what you're doing and you actually adjust your tire pressures and your preload, now it's a quick, simple 2-minute PSI drop. I carry a battery inflator with me. I've had the little foot pump thing, but I'm not broke anymore, so I got a battery inflator. And what I do is I jump on this bike and I have street PSI in my windshield turned up for the maximum wind blocking. And I go burn out a whole bunch of miles of highway to go explore areas like this. Once I get to an area like this, I stop, take a piss, scratch my ass. And then I drop the PSI to, like I said, I have that at 16 right now, but that is going to be up to you. 18 is fine, but it still wasn't as planted. But as this tire wears off in the middle, it's going to start becoming more in contact on like the loose dirt and the dirt road. So the more this middle wears, the more stable it's going to get, contrary to popular belief. So back to what I was saying, like I just run usually 24 to 28 in these when I'm on the highway, because it does. You get a more sporty feel. Here's the other thing. People think that I'm telling them to drop the PSI everywhere they go. Where I drop these to 16 to 18, this is all day of this, and I have no problem running them tires on the road for a long distance, but normally I don't, because what I'm doing is jumping out on some county roads and connecting some logging roads. I have been lazy and I just left them at that all day. It's not going to hurt you or the bike, but running lower PSIs on pavement, they say does wear the tire faster. However, running that pressure on pavement, you can feel the bike's real sluggish, doesn't want to turn in, it's just kind of sloppy feeling. But like I said, if you know what you're heading to and you're just jumping on, I think this is a perfect way to do it. So then when I'm all done doing this for the day, I air them back up and turn the windscreen back up to block the most wind it can. Then I start heading home and stop for a beer and a burger somewhere. And I just think it's just one of the favorite things to do. It's just the best day. So I think I babbled enough about this tire. This is the 510-17, obviously, because that's what size now. That's the same size as the DR650. I am going to get the front 700 when this is wear out. I am not a guy that wastes tires, that thinks he needs to put new tires on everything he gets immediately. So this is probably going to go another 2,000 because these fronts don't wear that much. Oh, I just noticed that. See how that's wore differently than the middle? That is from me running this at 18 on the pavement for a while, and I was getting lazy. But if it takes a coot hair less life off the tire, for me, it's worth it for having better grip on the places that I am riding a little more aggressively, like this stuff. Here's another thought I had. So I don't know if I covered the Shinko 244 compared to this. Now, I think I did talk about the side knob on the Shinko 244, which it's more aggressive, but it's not connected like that. So when you lean in the Shinko 244, that thing can flex. And when you're on a big, heavy bike and it starts doing that, leaning into a curve, it's kind of scary. The other thing with the 244 is it's a very thin carcass. I think I already talked about that, but I was having a thought, and I'm sure people have done this. So people do not like the 244 front, and I kind of felt it a little bit on a KLX, so it almost felt like it did, like what the Tusk tires do, is in and dive, and it still didn't have very good grip and any kind of loose stuff to be actually worth it. So I might get the 700 front, and at some point on this bike, I might actually try out 244 rear, knowing that the carcass is thinner and I'm gonna have to adjust my air pressure differently. And yeah, that's my thought on this. But so far I really like these, and for 90 bucks, and if they last 4,000, which they're kind of expected to be, I think it's a good tire. And if you mount your tires yourself, and 4,000, 3,000, the typical miles most people put on, unless you're commuting, not bad, Well, I guess if you have any questions on them, let me know. Like I said, on this bike with 700-800 miles, that's my opinions on it, but I do think it's a pretty good fit for this bike. Let me know if you got any questions.